the president of the Oxford University Africa Society, the delegates to this conference, fellow Africans. I'm just here to consolidate what has been said already. And the challenge we're addressing in this session is, can the youth change politics in Africa? And the answer is yes, but it can't be business as usual. You can't be leaders of youth movements for political parties, where you're organizing political rallies for the leaders to rule, where you are cannon fodder being used by the politicians. That's not how you can bring change in the politics of Africa. And I must have to acknowledge the efforts, where sometimes we behave as if there's nothing going on. This Africa 2.0, that's a good effort to change politics in Africa. There's the Africa Leaders Network. I hope you've heard about it. If you haven't, go to Google and become a member. We're meeting in October in Ghana. There's the African Leadership Academy in South Africa, a Pan-African high school. That's how you change the politics of Africa as young people. There's leaders today, by our colleague from Zimbabwe here, you've read about it in Forbes, where they're trying to close the gap between the school system and the workplace. While they're trying to be proactive so that young people don't wait to be given a hand up, but rather they give themselves a hand up. So there are efforts. You are doing a lot of good things, but my charge, my emphasis is that it can't be business as usual. How do we make sure we understand what we do differently? What is the nature of Africa's growth? What is the nature of the African economy? I'm trying to dramatize the importance of the ICT. For those who read, by the way, again, you have to read. That's how you can change the politics of Africa. The McKinsey Global Institute did a report on Africa, the Lions. Here are the key findings, and I'll just concentrate on one of them. The collective GDP of Africa in 2020 will be $2.6 trillion. $2.6 trillion for the whole of Africa. Half of it will come from what are called consumer-facing industries. 1.38 trillion is going to come from one sector, which we call consumer-facing industries. Our diamonds, our platinum, our gold, our oil will only give us $500 billion. So don't get caught up on these natural resources. In fact, ICT, retail, banking, services is going to be half of the GDP. What does it mean? It means young people must embrace ICT. Young people must use ICT as a means to change African politics, because ICT is going to contribute more than half of our GDP in Africa. So don't be an African leader who's talking only about oil, diamonds, and gold. That's the old school. That's me. I'm not exactly old school, but that's me. You must be talking about the ICT revolution. If you're going to change the politics of Africa, even the way you organize. When you look at Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, you see how Facebook, you see how Twitter. That is how young people can change the politics of Africa. But I'm dramatizing the economics as well. That actually the economy is about ICT. ICT is the economy. It is more than a resource boom. What I would say, the consumer-facing industries are retail, ICT, banking, and services. Also, remember in the morning, she spoke about the youth dividend. It will only be a youth dividend if we have skills, if we are innovative, if we are creative. The demographic dividend, in particular, the young people dividend. That's how we are going to change politics. Also, please, can you read a bit more? Remember, capitalism. What is the definition? Ownership of the means of production. Wrong. That's no longer correct. It's ownership of the means of production, ownership of the means of technology, ownership of the means of communication. The new African leader must rise up and start thinking about who owns the means of communication, Who owns the means of knowledge? Who owns the means of ICT? In addition, of course, to labor landed capital. That is the only way young people can change politics in Africa. If it is the old definition, remember land, labor, and capital. Now, if there were three things then, why do they call it capitalism? There was capital, there was labor, there was land. Why do they call it capitalism? It is because back at that time, he or she who had capital was queen. He or she who had capital was king. But not today. Today, talent is more important than cash. Entrepreneurship is more important than cash. Innovation and creativity are more important than cash. Cash. I know you like cash. Steve Jobs was abandoned by his parents. It was adopted. So he didn't have much of old money. He dropped out of a liberal arts college. So he didn't have much of Harvard education. But a good idea, creativity, ended up with him creating a $100 billion company. $100 billion. 10 times Zimbabwe. 3 times Ghana. One individual, without cash, without gold, but a good brain, creativity, innovation. I am saying, if young people are going to make a difference in African politics, they must be driven by entrepreneurship, by creativity, by innovation. They must worship entrepreneurship. Talent is more important than cash. We're moving from capitalism to talentism. I hope you all Ben agrees with that. Talentism, the talent now is key, not capitalism, or as defined in terms of capital. And by the way, you know, if you go to the Greeks, we're in Oxford, if you go to Latin, what is the definition of capital? What is capitos? If you go and check, capitos was about knowledge in the head. It was about power of the mind. It was nothing to do with dollars and capital and cash. But because we are corrupted by money, we now understand capital as cash. In fact, originally, it was about human capital. It was about the brain. So we're going back to the old view. We're going back to the proper definition of capital, which is about talent. These are the things that are going to drive the involvement of young people. Just to dramatize this issue of penetration of ICT, there's a correlation between mobile telephony penetration and GDP. Just by increasing by 10 the number of people who have access to mobile telephony, your GDP goes up by 1%. So if you are going to, by the way, making a difference in politics means prosperity, means economic growth. And that's why I want young people to understand the driver of ICT. ICT will change banking. Mutambara in Zambia, in Kenya, the biggest bank. In Zimbabwe, EcoCash. In Zimbabwe, EcoCash will be the biggest bank. Why? In most African countries, only 20% of the people have access to brick and mortar banking. But people have access to mobile telephony. So when you combine the mobile telephony platform and banking, you get more people. So Mutambara will be the biggest bank in Kenya, and EcoCash will be the biggest bank in Zimbabwe. The same story to education. Can you imagine a woman in Kumasi, in Cholocho, in Soweto, who is on the internet, having access to notes from Harvard, having access to notes from MIT. By the way, MIT has put all their notes online. They're saying, don't compete on notes, let's compete on teaching. So can you imagine the impact where every child, every poor person in Africa has access to world-class education? That's a revolution. Young people must drive that agenda of access to education through connectivity, through the internet, because that's a revolution in education. And of course, agriculture, crisis, communication, manufacturing, and health, e-health. This is why, if you are going to be a leader in Africa, if young people are going to change the politics of Africa, ICT is the way to go. We've seen it. Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, these are young people. We've done it in politics. What's missing is, why can't we do the same in government? These are young, I know there are age limits in some places, 40 years and so on. But I'm saying potentially the examples from the private sector should be able to lead us to this. And I like Steve Jobs because he was a superstar, a rock star. Here's the thesis: empathy for the customer. Think about the customer. Don't sympathize, empathize with the customer. Focus on a few things. The way you get the iPad, iPhone, iPod is by focusing on a few things. You know what Jobs used to do? You take the entire team on a retreat, and it says, can you list 100 products you want? The battle will come up with 100. Say, rank them 1 to 100. The battle will do it. Then he says, give you the top 10. And then they rank them 1 to 10. And he takes a pen and puts, and just put the number 1, 2, and 3, and move the rest. And you can imagine people very upset because people are attached to their products. You focus on a few things, even in your own career. If you try to be everything to all people, you won't succeed. By definition, strategy is about trade-offs. Choosing what to do is part of strategy. So we are learning about focus on a few products. Imputation is about beauty. They tell you, don't judge a book by the cover. No, people judge a book by the cover. And that's why when you look at an iPad, it is beautiful. An iPhone, it looks great because Jobs was worried about imputation, aesthetics. Focus on talents. Again, you can see he didn't tolerate what he called bozos. He was very rude and cruel. He only wanted 8 players. So we must cherish talent. I thought I was saying later on, we're learning from this guy. Why am I looking at this man? How can one individual bring about a revolution in 5 industries? The World Bank has not been done that. 5 industries, the World Bank. The computer industries, revolution through Mac, iPad, and iPhone. Mobile telephony, the iPhone. Music, iPod and iTunes. Movies, Pixar, animation. Education, you have now the whole library on an iPad. You don't need a library. I hope Oxford is catching up. It's going to the library, will be replaced by one iPad. I'm trying to say, this is private sector, this is science, but surely the same methodology, the same philosophy must be thought about by African young people. Was that a young person who brought about a revolution in 5 industries? What are some of these slogans? Stay hungry. I hope you are staying hungry. Don't get too full. Stay foolish. And I'm saying at Oxford, it's okay to be a bit foolish. Because when you're a bit foolish, seeking knowledge. When you are so content in being a baller intellectually, you don't listen, you don't learn. Stay foolish. And think different. Not different, you think different as you think big. Are you thinking big in Africa as a young person? Are you thinking different? And remember, we talked about making a difference in your community. For Jobs, it was not enough to make a difference in America. For Jobs, it was not enough to make a difference in the Americas. It was not enough to make a difference in the continent of America. It was not enough to make a difference in the world. It was too small. You want to make a dent to the entire universe. That is the kind of spirit we seek to see in young people if they're going to make a difference in the world. What did you say? Those crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who actually do. So the sister from Kenya, please keep dreaming crazy. Running for president, please support her. She will actually make a difference by injecting new ideas. She might not make it versus Odinga and Kibaki, but that's not the point. The point is that she must be crazy enough to think that she can change the world, and she will actually change the world. This is the only way young people, because we have read the analysis, the odds are against us. Of course, the odds are against us. I gave an example last night about feasibility study. If in 1960 Mandela, Sisulu, and Governor Mbeki sat down and said, let's do an analysis, Mackenzie style, and determine whether the Boers can be defeated. And Mackenzie, BCG, Bain analysis will say, no, Mandela, you can't defeat the Boers. Stick to the law. Be a lawyer. And there will be no South Africa, there will be no Mandela. So be crazy enough to take a plunge, to take a risk. And I won't go to the Harvard Business Review. Again, read the Harvard Business Review, read McKinsey Quarterly, read the Sloan's Management Review, read the journals from Oxford. This is from the Harvard Business Review. They summarize the lessons from jobs. Focus, simplify, take responsibility end to end. When behind leapfrog, put product for profits. Don't be a slave to focus groups. What we're saying here, don't believe the customer too much. You read the language, customer is king, customer is king. No, the customers sometimes don't know what they want. Do you think there is someone who went and told Jobs, please can you design an iPad? Can you design an iPhone? Even the cell phone itself. You know, if you had asked people in the early century, what should we do when the cars are not there? What do you want to do to move? They said, can you design a fast horse with the army? They could not conceptualize a car. So, be able to design things that customers are not aware of. Bend reality. In other words, you have this thing called reality distortion factor. You would force engineers to go and design something that they think doesn't actually work because of physics. So, bending reality. Don't caught up on realism and realistic. Bend reality is the slogan. Imputation talks about push for perfection, tolerate only A players. That's a bit elitist, but that's how you operate. Only A players. Engage face to face. Know both the big picture and the details. The intersection, I know we're at Oxford. People tell me, say, I'm a physicist, I'm a biologist, I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor. Job was not interested in that. He wanted to interface between science and society. That's how you get an iPad. When physics meets religion, when physics meets theology and literature. So the interface between humanity and science is where you get your thing. What are we trying to do in Africa? We must have peace. I've spoken about the new things you need to do. The measures of success, let us not have the war between Sudan and Southern Sudan. Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Rwanda, Uganda. We must make sure as young people, we build peace in Africa. Non-partisanship was spoken about very eloquently this morning. Let's have a national vision, a national brand, which is about party. It should not matter in Ghana who wins the next election in December if the vision is shared. It should not matter. Democracy allows us to have ownership and buy-in by ordinary people. It allows equal opportunity, not necessarily equal outcomes. And all these things are meaningless unless people are prosperous. So young people must think about the prosperity revolution. Nkrumah, Mandela, and others delivered independence and politics. What we need to do now is make sure people are living well. And of course, we need to push for regional integration, and peace is required for that. Democracy unleashes human potential, and also we have dignity when there's democracy. We have equal opportunity for our people. This one, no one has got it. South Africa, your so-called dream okay country. That's an ANC vision. It's not good enough. When they do a proper vision, the work that Trevor has done on the national plan, the IFP and DA must be on board. Because the IFP will win next election in 20 years' time. Don't tell me they're small. Mandela and the ANC were small in 1960. So depending on how the ANC behaves, in 20 years' time, maybe IFP will be the power, the party, or another party. So let us be above party on the vision, on the national interest. And of course, we emphasize prosperity. We are moving away, young people, from civil rights to silver rights. So if you're going to change the politics in Africa, don't sing the songs of civil rights. Tell us about silver rights, economic rights, empowerment, safety, wealth creation, ownership, job, food, wealth. This is the new language we want. We have enough slogans. We have enough black presidents since 1957. But with very few Bill Gates and very few Steve Jobs, very few people who are successful economically. But of course, we need enablers there. You have access to land, finance, skills, market science, technology, financial literacy. Don't tell me I have a BA from Oxford. Are you financially literate? You understand the language of money? Can you have a conversation with the IMF and World Bank? That's the problem of a very narrow educational system like we have in England. A PhD in physics a PhD in chemistry who doesn't know how to balance their books, who doesn't understand the constitution or the law. The American system has done a better job by the liberal arts approach, where in your first year and second year you do everything. But what I'm concerned about, not everything, money is financial literacy, the language of money, entrepreneurship. And while we're at education, please don't pursue education as an end in itself. If the best student in Oxford in physics has a good idea, allow him to drop out and form a company that employs all physicists. I had the opportunity to ask Bill Gates. Bill Gates was at Harvard studying physics and dropped out. So when I met him in my Davos, I was very curious. I said, look, how did you manage to drop out of Harvard? Where I come from in my village, if I dropped out of Oxford, the entire village would stone me. How dare you get the opportunity to go to Oxford and you drop out? They will stone me in my village. How did you do it? Then he laughed. I never really dropped out actually. I cut a deal with my professors. I went to them, they said, look, you've got a very good idea. You go out there, pursue your dream. If you succeed, don't come back. But if you are in trouble and you need your degree, please come back to talk. How many institutions are that flexible? If we are not flexible, we are killing entrepreneurship. The top lawyer student, the top engineering student, if they have a good idea, please, professor, allow them to become an entrepreneur and form a company like Bill Gates, like Steve Jobs. And if they are in trouble, bring them back and give them their degree. The American system is very flexible. You can take your degree in 4 years, in 5 years, in 20 years. It's a credit system. We need that kind of flexibility, but more importantly, we must encourage dropouts. But these are clever dropouts. Steve Jobs dropped out of a liberal arts, not even Harvard, liberal arts. Steve Jobs, he dropped out of a liberal arts college, and we've shown what he's done. Another issue I want to emphasize, I think it was touched in the morning. It's not enough to have a good constitution. It's not enough to have good laws. It's not enough to have good institutions. Do you believe in those institutions? Do you believe in those laws? Do you respect the Constitution? Unfortunately, Mr. President, you cannot legislate respect. You cannot legislate love. You cannot legislate morality. You cannot legislate constitutionalism. What is that animal? Constitutionalism is the tradition, the behavior, the culture of respecting the Constitution. That is grown through civic education. That is grown through social mobilization. That is grown through leading by example. It takes time. So the young African leaders must have values, but those values can't be legislated. They must be grown through meetings like this one. Belief in the democratic principle, you can't legislate that. You can't legislate belief that civilian authority is supreme over military. In America, they're the biggest army in the world. How come there was never a coup d'etat? And they've got the biggest army. And a very couple in Ghana and Nigeria, small armies taking over. You know why? In the army in America, the value system is that we are subordinate to civilian authority. We don't even think about it. If I want to become a president, I take off my uniform, I become Eisenhower, I become Colin Powell, and I become a civilian leader. There's a clarity of values within the army. Even their own 10 minutes, you know, remember they've got 10 minutes and you out. Remember when Clinton was going up and Bush Jr. was coming in, let us go. Clinton was more popular than Bush and Gore put together. But the Americans never even contemplated the third term. Because they believe in that system. Even if you are Jesus, 2 terms, please, Jesus. 2 terms, Jesus. Don't legislate that. It's a value system. What happened in Malawi? Someone was changing the constitution. What happened in Zambia? 3rd term. Nigeria? 3rd term. Please, what I'm emphasizing is, please, you go to think about how you're going to grow those values. Respect and belief in human rights. Respect for racial and gender equality. Cherishing diversity. Diversity is a virtue. There must be dignity in diversity. We can be united without being uniform. How do we live and walk that talk? So, laws and rules are not enough. It takes time to build a value system. We've spoken very much about the national vision, constitution. I'll just emphasize what we're saying. We're saying for every country, there must be a bucket of things that you don't challenge. The name of the country, no debate. The flag of the country, no debate. The boundary of the country, no debate. The anthem, I hope no debate. Let us put in that bucket of things we don't challenge. A constitution, a vision, a brand. So that whoever comes to power, they are pursuing the same vision, they are pursuing the same constitution, they are pursuing the same national brand. This is what we mean by a non-partisan, national interest-driven intervention by young people. We need a democratic constitution that we all agree upon. We need a national brand. By brand, we mean identity, trade, tourism, investment, people, governance, culture. 5, hexagon. Agreed in a country. I'll just emphasize that it's not enough to have a dream. I know you like dreaming, you're at Oxford, aren't you? You must also have what is called a game plan. We now know your dream. We now know your destination economy. What are you going to do to move from where you are today to the promised land? The vision is the house on the top of the hill. The vision is the destination. But how are you going to move from where you are to the promised land? That's the strategy. By the way, this is how they do it at Harvard. So we're learning from we're teaching them as well. If you don't have a strategy for a company, you can't achieve the vision. So make sure as you come in as young people, you have dreamt the vision, but you also spend time on the plan. But that's not enough. Implementation, implementation, implementation. There is a dearth of doing things in Africa. Execution is critical. So, back to the framework, Kenya has done a good job of the vision, by the way. Zimbabwe is working on one, South Africa also, and others. You must have a 2040 vision, then you have the economic vision, then you have the social vision, you have the political vision. Then you have major impact projects like Inga, Patoka, Volta Dam. Those are major impact projects that will drive the vision. Do it for Kenya, do it for Tanzania, do it for Nigeria. So that you have an overarching vision and 3 pillars. And then you have your spirituality and humanity as overarching issues. For example, you could say a globally competitive and prosperous nation with a high quality of life by 2040. Translation, grow by 10% for the next 30 years. You say the same, social and so on. Okay, if you do that for Zimbabwe, it will be $100 billion economy in 2040. Working on a base of 10 billion today. What is the vision for Ghana? What is the vision for Nigeria economically, socially, and politically? I'm breaking down the vision that we got from the World Bank. The colleague at the beginning emphasized the vision. I'm just showing you how we actually do it. Kenya has done some of this work. And we're emphasizing that a compelling vision is not enough. We must have the strategy, and then we must have the execution. Okay? In the very debate at Harvard and Cambridge, the other place, we're not supposed to say Cambridge, the other place. What is more important, strategy or execution? And professors battle. Wrong debate, wrong conversation. Execution is strategy. If you are not doing things, you have no strategy. So don't have this superfluous conversation about the difference between execution and strategy. Execution is strategy. I'm emphasizing that young people, if you are going to make a difference in Africa, please do things. Implement things. And also emphasize the speed of execution. Doing things at the speed of execution. The other thing that young people must do is to measure things. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You must monitor, you must evaluate. Don't just do things without monitoring and evaluation. So the plans must be monitored, and then we can have the impacts. If you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. These are the things young people must do differently. African leaders are not measuring their performance. If you are going to make a difference in the politics, you must measure. You must also agree on the definition of success. What is success? Do you agree in the department? Do you agree in the country? Do you agree in the regional body? If you do not measure results, you cannot have success or failure. You are probably rewarding failure. They are important reasons why we measure things. And I'll rush through this one, but you must understand what we mean by competitiveness. I saw the lady from Mo Ibrahim defend her industry. We need more measurements. Measure all these things: infrastructure, quality of life, and there are about 5 of them. She represents one from Africa, so don't give her a hard time. All these other ones are Eurocentric and foreign. WEF, World Bank, not exactly foreign. Economic freedom, human development index. Then Mo Ibrahim, please, can you study her index? It's an effort by Mo Ibrahim to say, how do you measure governance? How do you measure performance? How do you measure leadership? And if you don't like what she does, come up with your own measurements. What I don't want is to have no measures. It's just running the country with no measures. Here are 5 examples. Choose your favorites and see how you are doing. The WEF one is for those 3, and then using the WEF now. Number 1 country in the world, Switzerland. Number 2 country in the world, Singapore. So don't overplay this democracy stuff. Singapore is called a nanny state. But according to America, according to Europe, Singapore is number 2 in terms of global competitiveness, minus democracy. I love democracy, but you must also think about the economy. Let's spend time on the economy. Sweden, number 3, Finland, number 4, and then the UK, number 10. Now, where are the BRICS? You find Brazil at 53, Russia 66, India 56, China 26, South Africa 50. Look at those GDP numbers. 2.1 trillion, 1.4 trillion, China 5.8 trillion. What is South Africa doing there? You don't belong. South Africa, please, I'm going to be very harsh here. This is political correctness. They're trying to be nice to you. You don't belong to this chart. We do. With $356 billion as a GDP and 50 million people, you don't belong. How do you belong? Let us go together as SADC. 250 million people, now you belong. Let us go together as COMESA. 400 million people, now you belong. Let us go together as an African continent, 1 billion people. Now you make sense to China. Why would China care about a country with 50 million people? Chicken change. But if South Africa was going as part of Africa, Mr. China, Miss India, I'm here representing 1 billion Africans. Can we talk? Those are very good conversations. So please, South Africa.
Minister, we're mindful of time, but I'm sure everyone would like to engage with you. So if you'd like to join the panel, and then we can open up the questions, and perhaps you can make some of your points during the panel.
So just to summarize the ending argument. People look at the numbers, they look at the numbers, you see one is done very well, is at 70, and you can then define GDP beyond, definition beyond GDP. I'll emphasize what I'm pushing. You must define growth in terms of 3S plus 2G. We're emphasizing what is called the Global Happiness Index and also the Planet Happiness Index. These are new numbers we must talk about as young people. Otherwise, we won't be able to push. And then I'll just emphasize the issue of value addition as a new concept. And also ourselves as Africans, we have made contributions. Don't just look at Europe. We have a contribution around our culture. Ubuntu, I am because we are because I am. Unless we leverage our own contributions, we won't be as effective as we should be. Let's look at Senghor and Nkrumah. We talked about the issues about civilization. This is coming from Senghor in Senegal. Nkrumah, Ben Bella, and Egyptology. What will Nkrumah say today? And I'm finishing. Nkrumah, if he was around today, you'll be saying that the economic prosperity of South Africa is not sufficient, is not good enough and it is linked to the prosperity of the rest of the African continent. So we must think now about entrepreneurship, about economics, and make sure every African country is doing well. You will never be respected as an African until the entire African continent has succeeded. That's Kruma today. Kruma will be talking about ACT. Kruma will talk about globalization. Kruma will talk about entrepreneurship. But at an Africa-wide level for 1 billion Africans. Okay? And so we are pushing regional attractiveness, regional competitiveness, and not national competitiveness. And that is how we end by saying, you have heard the debate. Leaders, are they born? Leaders, are they made? And you've heard the conversation at Harvard and also at Oxford. Wrong discussion. None of the above. Leadership is a decision. So I want to urge you as young people, don't worry about how you were born. Don't worry about where you went to school. Decide to lead. Why am I saying this? When you look at when you look at Gandhi, Gandhi was an average lawyer in South Africa, very mediocre. He wasn't born well. But he decided to lead. Gandhi is now an institution. Mandela was an average lawyer, very articulate. But Mandela made a decision to lead. Mandela is now an institution. Mandela is an icon. Don't feel that the way you were born, the amount of money you have, the type of education you have, will determine whether you become a leader or not in Africa. Decide to lead. Leadership is a decision. And don't buy this phrase that says, young people are leaders of tomorrow. Reject that. Young people must lead today. I thank you very much for listening.